Hello and welcome to Summit and Stitch. My name is Brittany and this is just going to be my little space to talk about everything that I love, primarily knitting and a touch of crochet with all the other things that I love just kind of sprinkled in. So super quick, I'll just introduce how I got the name for Summit and Stitch. I have two favorite hobbies. One is knitting and one is hiking, adventuring, exploring, pretty much anything in that realm. If it is outside and it is going to a new place, I am most likely 100% down and absolutely in for any sort of adventure. So me and my husband do travel frequently, so I will pull in little bits of my travels or our travels, sorry babe, of our travels and just kind of talk and share and hopefully connect with people that love knitting and maybe, just maybe, you love traveling and adventure and nature just as much as I do. So that is where the name Summit and Stitch came from. This is episode 1, and what I'm kind of planning on doing for all of these is just sharing what's going on in my life week to week, with the focus being something on knitting most likely, or crochet because I do both, but nothing too strict. So let's see. So in the past week, we just got back from Saguaro. It's not Saguaro for all of you super white people out there like me. It is Saguaro. So the G is a W, and it is really destroying my brain trying to pronounce that right. And I still might not be pronouncing it right, but it is not Saguaro. It is with a W. So we just got back from that national park in Arizona, and that was so much fun. I was so sad to have to come home, which is absolutely going to make me sound like such a whiny baby because we are blessed enough to live in Colorado. So, you know, crying about coming home to Colorado is like, are you serious? But Arizona is just, has always been one of my favorite places in the world. So we just got back from there, and I'll post some little videos around so that you can kind of see what we got up to. But we hiked, oh boy, a total of almost 40 miles and did like 5,000 feet of elevation gain in the 6 days that we were there, which was really 4. Yeah, that sounds about right. About 4 days that we actually were visiting the park and doing stuff. About 40 miles and 5,000 feet of elevation, or 4,000. Regardless, we hiked our butts off because it was so nice, and it's just so amazing to see such a different landscape than what we're used to. So that was awesome. Cannot wait to go back. I got this beautiful coffee mug from there, and it is just my favorite thing in the world. I love it so much. So that was kind of what we were up to while we were there. My knits while we were in Tucson was one thing that I was working on. I think I finished this at home, but this was something that I was working on while I was there. And this is just a simple little cowl that I was making. I played yarn chicken way too hard with this guy. So it was actually supposed to be a full-on like cowl bandana style, and it was really, really cool because I ended up having to just finish off the ribbing and bind it off because I completely ran out of yarn, to the point where to finish the bind off, I actually had to do this, and it bugs the crap out of me, but I needed, I don't know, like 6 inches more of yarn than I had, and I simply just had to do that. So I ended up just finishing it off and not even doing what made the cowl so special, which it had, like I said, like this bandana type style that went down here. But it's still super great now that winter has officially hit Colorado, and I have already gotten a ton of use out of this. Now, I used Loops and Thread Impeccable Acrylic in one of their tweed colors. You can get this at Michael's if you get a yarn at craft stores like that. This was something that I had left over, so this was a stash buster, and like I said, I went full on yarn chicken and really lost with it, but I actually really enjoy it. So the other things that I finished this week, some little things because I am in super duper stash buster mode. I have been letting my stash build up for the last year, and it's time to get rid of it. Though I do not have a stash that even is remotely close to what some people have, I don't want to get to that point. I want to keep a very manageable amount of yarn at any one given time. I finished this little pocket octopus, and he's super duper cute. Out of this bulky weight yarn that I had no idea what it was, but it needed to go. So crocheted up this little guy. But this is the Pocket Octopus by Erica Townsend, is who wrote this. Isn't he so cute? He's adorable. I actually crochet a lot of little stuffies, and I'll put them like in my houseplants, and then I just kind of like save them. So this year we did Operation Christmas Child, which if you have either ever done it or if you've ever heard of it, it is where you pack a box for a child that will then receive it in a third world country on Christmas so that they have something to open. So it was something that we did through our church, and I actually put several little plushies that I had made in mine. So that's kind of what I'm just do with these guys. I don't necessarily make them because I do anything with them or because I have anyone to give them to. These little guys are really just stash busters to pass along when it feels right. So that is that guy. Then the next one is this adorable little thing called a pentapus, and I knitted this one, and it was super difficult to knit something this small. I hadn't never done that before. And as per usual, I played yarn chicken hard and lost at the very, very, very end, as I'm really good at doing. And this is so unfortunate. I will never be able to give this away because what I had in mind, I was like, oh, well, I didn't know. I knew I was running out of yarn, but I didn't know exactly where I was running out of yarn. So my thought was I will just change over to a yarn in like the same color family with this, and once I run out of yarn, and his like belly and like his underside will be a different color, right? So it'll be kind of cute. Like his underside is a different color and the rest of him is this purple color that was in my stash that needed to go. Well, I had just a little bit more purple than I thought, and I didn't think through, and it is hilarious. When I picked my secondary color, because I was just trying to shoot for something that was like pink, that was like a purplish pink color, not thinking. And it was also at night while I was finishing this, so we were laying in bed watching a show, so we weren't like, the lights weren't fully on or anything. And the color that I picked looks like a butthole. 100%. Like, I finished it and my husband was like, wow, nice yarn color choice there. So, introducing the pentapus with a butthole, unfortunately. But it's super cute, so it can never be gifted away because, I don't know, that's what it looked like to us. I could be wrong, but when he's like this, he's super cute. So this was the pentapus by Dawn Prickett. If you do make it, I highly recommend doing magic circle or magic loop instead of DPNs, because maybe it was just me, but you start with 5 stitches and I could not for the life of me start on DPNs with 5 stitches. My DPNs were just going all over the place and I was super frustrated. So did magic loop and it worked great. He's super cute. If you run out of yarn at the bottom, don't choose the color that I did. And then the last little thing, this was a worry worm, because after I finished this friend, I still had some of this left over and I was like, oh my gosh. So made a little worm and he lives just in one of my potted plants because it's cute. And this is the Worry Worm, is by Cat Witherall. So these are all on Ravelry and that's how I found them. So he's cute. He used up the rest of that yarn and that was what I needed. So that was perfect. So moving on to my whips currently. So the one that I have planned, which is why I am making so much Stash Buster stuff, because what I like to do is I like to alternate making really popular patterns that are tried and true and tested, and buying yarn for those patterns specifically, and then alternating between one pattern that I bought yarn for and one pattern that I did a Stash Buster for. So I'm not allowed to buy yarn for the second pattern. I am going to knit the ultra famous Sophie scarf by Petite Knits, and I went for the moon and bought the Lang Premier Cashmere yarn for it. It's one of the recommended yarns on Ravelry for that pattern. So I bought that about a week ago and USPS has no idea where it is. And that's awesome because I spent a lot of money on 2 balls of that yarn, or 2 skeins, or I think it comes in little balls. And I'm super bummed so that it's taking forever to get here, but this is just buying anything around the holidays is it ends up like this. So it's not like it is completely unheard of in December to not get what you need from USPS and for them to be like, we have no idea where it's at. So my really expensive yarn is lost in transit at the moment. So while I'm waiting on yarn for my actual patterns to come through, I will do Stash Buster patterns. And I will go to Ravelry, type in exactly how much yarn of that one that I have, and just do whatever it is that comes up. And I end up making a lot of really unique things that I would have never made beforehand, or that I would have never made otherwise. So since I'm waiting on my yarn, the Stash Buster that I'm working on right now is a pair of socks. So this is my first pair of socks. I have never done socks before. This is where I'm at. So this is attempt number 2, because attempt number 1, I had to frog. And I got all the way to about to do the toe and then realized that there was no shot and I was gonna have to frog it, and I was really bummed. So the pattern that I'm following are the DK Weight Vanilla Socks by Crazy Sock Lady Designs. And what I will say is I totally agree that not every pattern needs to be written for beginners at all whatsoever. Like, totally fine. I got super lost in the pattern and actually had to watch YouTube videos on how to construct a sock. Now that I've done that, I am way more knowledgeable going into this one this time. But what happened the first time is, in the pattern, and this might be a sock thing or this might just be this pattern thing, but the gauge was written at 7 stitches per inch. approximately. So I've never worked with a gauge swatch that wasn't like X amount of rows by X amount of stitches. So when all I had to work with was approximately 7 stitches per inch, I was like, okay. And the recommended needle size is US 3.25 millimeters needles for a DK weight sock. And those needles were so small for at least the DK weight yarn that I have. So like I said, this is a stash buster. The way I do stash busters, I totally understand that I'm gonna get just some weird projects, but I don't know what kind of DK weight you can use 3.25 millimeter needles with. Maybe this is just too much or too thick. Whatever the reason, 3.25 millimeter needles gave me, one, a fabric that was knitting up so thick it had no like give to it. Like this finally has a little bit of stretch now that I'm on sock number 2. So what happened was I was like, well, okay, like it calls for DK weight yarn and 3.25 millimeter needles, so I'm just gonna do it. And at first, so the cuff went over my foot just fine. It was a little tight, but I was like, well, you know, they're socks, they're handmade socks. I'll be able to stretch it out. Maybe it'll be okay. I'm gonna keep going. And then I knitted a little bit more of the body, and it was getting a little tighter, but you know, it still went on my foot. So I was like, okay, cool. Went through all of the rigmarole of figuring out how to do the heel and what are the actual turn, the slip stitch heel flap, the heel turn, and then the gusset. Went through all of that painstakingly via YouTube tutorials, not on this pattern. I figured that out and then was making the body of the sock. And so after I did the heel and the gusset and all that stuff, it still slid over my foot. So then the next day I was like, cool. This was back when my yarn had an actual delivery date. I was like, cool, the yarn for the Sophie scarf is gonna come in tomorrow. I wanna really, really crank through these socks. So I started knitting the body of the sock and got to the point of the toe. And I was like, cool, let me just make sure that it still goes on. And it would not go over my foot at all. So obviously the more that I knitted on it, the tighter it got, the smaller it got, and the less give that it had. And so I got pretty much all the way done with sock number 1 and had to frog it because I got it over my foot eventually. But I thought I was gonna have to cut it off my foot. And of course my husband is laughing so hard at me, like laying in bed trying to like yank this sock off of my foot. So yeah. So with that being said, I was like, well, okay, well, my yarn is now lost. I still need to do something with this yarn that I have. So I redid it and I went up to 3.75 millimeter needles. And I am still almost concerned that I'm gonna have the same problem with this. But when I don't have any gauge to work with, it's really hard. So I'm testing it over my foot every few seconds, and this one actually will like extend and like stretch. So I am really, really, really hoping that I don't have to frog this one too, because I might cry. Not really, but I'll be really bummed. So hopefully. But the yarn that I'm using for This is Yarn Bees Simply Flawless. And this is just something that I had left over from one of my first knitting projects, which was a baby blanket for my sister who's about to have a baby almost any day now. So I was working on this way back in like June, July, and this yarn has just been sitting around, so it needed to go. And so that's the yarn that I'm working with. This is in the colorway teal. This is what's on my needles right now, and it'll be on my needles maybe for a while. I don't know, because once my yarn for the Sophie scarf gets here, then I'll switch over to that one, and this project will just stay as a whip until I move on to the next big project. So that's what I'm working on right now. I was super duper bummed, but it does, you know, for some super cheap acrylic yarn that you can get at Hobby Lobby, it does make a really pretty fabric. And you probably can't tell, but it does have like this nice like shine to it. So I'm not upset. I think it'll be great for these socks if I ever get the gauge right. I wish I didn't have to make 75% of a sock to have the gauge to figure out if the gauge is right, but whichever. It is what it is. And then the next thing that is on my needles, but is actually a crochet project that I have been working on for an entire year. This, and I'm probably not gonna unfold it, but this is my temperature blanket for 2025. I've always wanted to do one of these. So at the beginning of this year, I actually remembered, because I'd always remember in like April. And that's just way too far along in the year to look up all of the history of the weather for like 4 months. That's just not a thing. So this is my blanket for this year, and the year is coming to a close, so it is almost over. And it has turned into a behemoth of a blanket. I do love it. I do very much love it. So this was the start of 2025, and this is where I am now. All of the dark green. So this was all summer, and then now you can see we're getting back into fall, and we're getting back into winter with it. So I am very stoked on that. I will, at this point, I think probably always do one, because I just love the idea, because I don't love blankets enough to actually sit down and knit or crochet a blanket. So this is just a single crocheted blanket, because I didn't pick an actual pattern. I was just like, cool, I'm just gonna make rows and see if I will even keep up with this, and I did. What I did not think of was the reality of having to weave in 365-ish ends. So next year, I will weave in the ends as I go along. I'm debating whether this is just going to be a tassel blanket, or if I'm going to go through the actual process of weaving in all these ends, which makes me want to cry, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But this is the other thing that is forever here, is the temperature blanket. But I actually wanted to talk about this week as kind of like the main topic is, see, how many do I have? 7 things that I've learned in my first year of being a knitter. So a little bit of backstory. I have been crocheting for probably 15 years. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I was some age between 10 and 12. Maybe even, so 10, 11, or 12, one of those years. And I had one of my grandmothers sat me down one day and was like, I'm going to teach you how to crochet, because she really wanted to pass something down to me. And that was one of the most special memories that I have, because I remember sitting on the couch with her and her teaching me how to do a single crochet and how to crochet. And that's such a special memory for me because I didn't have a very standard childhood. So, you know, that's really the only memory that I have of a adult in my childhood, like trying to teach me something and pass something down to me and like spending that quality of time with me. So it was super special. And I just kept up with it for my entire life since then. And I always wanted to know how to knit, but I was way too intimidated. I, for some reason, was like, you'll never be able to figure it out. You're not good enough with using both of your hands to make it work. Like, it's just not gonna work. And I didn't ever actually try. And so I don't know what happened. I probably saw some like knitted thing on YouTube or Instagram or Pinterest or whatnot, but for some reason, at the very, very, very beginning of this year in January, I was like, I am going to teach myself how to knit. Gosh darn it, I'm gonna do it. I want to learn how to do it. I can do it. And so I went and got some really crappy yarn and some straight needles. I think that's single point. That's what they're called. I legitimately never use them, so I have no idea what they're called. Single point needles. And slowly but surely taught myself how to knit at the beginning of this year. And it has been an addiction since. I absolutely love it. Like, I've always loved making things. I've always loved crochet and working with yarn and making little things, but I wanted to level up is what it felt like. So, thing number one that I learned, knitting is very different than crochet. Not in a one is better than the other way, but just in the sense that they are two totally different things. I personally feel like the only thing that knitting and crochet have in common is that you are using yarn and you're making stitches. Beyond that, I swear, like, the differences are just so vast. So vast that I don't really even think that they can be compared, because you just make totally different things and you work in different ways. And I used to think that knitting was like the advanced version of crochet. And I don't know, I guess maybe you could look at it like that, because in my opinion, knitting is way harder than crocheting, but that's most likely because I was taught how to crochet and spent then 15 years thinking that knitting was this impossible thing that I could never accomplish. So I don't think one is better than the other. I just think they're both very different, and I will notice that if I spend a really long time working on a project and knitting, sometimes I really like to take a break and just crochet something nice and quick like this to kind of, I don't know, get the little endorphin high of, or the little dopamine hit of finishing something and marking it off on Ravelry. But two totally different things, and I'm very happy that I know how to do both. Number two, knitting is vast. Now, this is kind of where I feel like the big differences between like crochet and knitting come in, because, you know, with crochet, I bought one set of hooks and that was it. I didn't need anything else, you know. I had my hooks, I had a couple stitch markers and my yarn, and that was all I needed. And there's not really a whole lot of different ways to make certain stitches and do certain things in crochet, unlike knitting, right? So what I mean by that is you know, there's really only one, maybe two ways to knit up a single crochet or a double crochet. Like there's tons of different stitches that you can do in crochet, but the fundamentals are pretty much the same. You insert the hook, you grab the yarn, and you do whatever. But with knitting, I mean, to me, and it might be because I am only a year in, but it feels like there is an infinite amount of cast-ons, an infinite amount of bind-offs. You can learn English style, you can learn continental, you can learn Norwegian. There's so many different techniques and color work and things that you can make, and oh, for this pattern you need these needles and this, and then you need this, and it was so much more fast to me compared to crochet, where it was like you needed to know how to make single crochets and double crochets and maybe one special stitch, and then you needed the right hook, and you usually only needed one hook, and that was kind of it. So it definitely caught me off guard when I realized that there were 500 different ways to get the same result when it comes to knitting. And I think that's probably why it excites me so much, because of the fact that I feel like I could knit for 40 years and still find new things to learn and still not be an expert. Ew, I don't like that at all. And I would still not be an expert when it comes to knitting. Like, I don't know if I'll ever be an expert when it comes to knitting because it just feels so vast. Number 3, fiber is important. This is something that even though I've been crocheting for a really long time, I never understood, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I never liked the way that like crocheted like garments looked. Like, look, there are some girls that can pull off a granny stitch vest or granny square. There are some girls that can pull off a granny square vest, cardigan, shirt, skirt, dress, tank top, whatever it is, you name it. I am not one of those. I do not like the granny square clothing. I don't really like the single crochet clothing. I never just really liked the way that crochet clothing looked. So I never made it. So therefore, I never really understood the importance of fiber and why you would want certain types of fiber for certain types of things. And I just never even crossed my mind until I started knitting. And then it's like, oh, okay, you want this type of fiber for sweaters, this type of fiber for socks, hats. Are you knitting this for winter or summer? You know, do you want it to be more moisture wicking or more warm? You know, there's just so many different things, and like the idea of holding like strands like double, like let's knit with like a mohair and alpaca, and like alpaca can sometimes lose its structure if you put it in a sweater. All these different things I had no idea about, because when I was crocheting, I would primarily make, you know, little figures or bags or scarves, you know, things like that. And that was kind of what I did. And so it was always fine to just go to Hobby Lobby or Michael's and just buy whatever yarn they had that I thought was pretty. And that was the only thing that I knew about yarn. And so it's really cool to see just how much goes into yarn. And that's absolutely something that you can take to crochet too, and that is applicable to crochet. But due to the things that I crocheted, it never forced me to learn that. Number 4, you don't need a set of every single needle imaginable. I really, really, really wish that I knew what I know now and would have only bought the 2 interchangeable knitting needle sets that I have now, and then the 1 pack of DPNs that I have, which honestly, now that I'm more familiar with Magic Loop, I find myself just doing magic loop way more than DPNs, but DPNs are very helpful for some things, so I am happy that I have them because magic loop does irritate me sometimes. But regardless, the first thing that I did when I started knitting was I went to Michael's and bought the single point needles, which, let me just say, I hate those things. I hate single point needles so much. Sure, I want to look like the stereotypical knitter with, you know, the single point knitting needles. I hate them. I use them for one thing and never touch them again. They need to go to the thrift store because I will never buy another set of single point needles ever. Unless someone can tell me what is more advantageous to have this much knitting needle flopping around in here and hitting you and hitting everything behind you versus just using circulars. But regardless, after that, I knew absolutely nothing about circular knitting needles and ended up buying a pack of like every size imaginable bamboo, like 32-inch circular knitting needles. Not interchangeable, by the way, just fixed circulars. And let me tell you, one, I hate bamboo. And two, I will never, ever need like a 15 millimeter bamboo 32-inch circular needle. And if I do, I will come back and eat my words. But I don't think I will ever use that thing. So I have, as I throw things everywhere, literal bags of knitting needles, of DPNs, the bamboo needles, things that I bought at the thrift store before I understood that I didn't need to buy every single knitting needle that I came across. And I could have saved a lot of money by just buying the 2 interchangeable ones that I bought and leaving it at that. Number 5, gauge. I'm gonna say that again for nobody but myself. Gauge is so important. I was so against spending the time to knit gauge swatches until I frogged an entire sweater. That'll make you do the gauge swatch. I think if anyone has knitted, that's enough said. There's a reason people knit gauge swatches. Much better to spend 30 minutes knitting a gauge swatch than 30 hours knitting a sweater only to pull it apart. That was a hard lesson, but I learned it. And that ties into number 6. You will completely mess up. You can try to make all of the stars align when it comes to a knitting project, and sometimes it just doesn't work. Whether it's your fault, whether it is a bad yarn choice, whether it is a bad pattern, whether it is just simple confusion and missing a line of stitches or making a wrong stitch and not recognizing it, dropping stitches, whatever. You will mess up. And it's okay. You're gonna frog entire sweaters. And you're gonna cry as you do it. And you're not gonna be able to get socks off of your feet or on your feet, but you're gonna do it. And it's gonna happen, and you can try as hard as you want to avoid it. But if there is one thing that I have learned after watching so many very advanced knitters on YouTube and other beginners and other intermediate knitters, is that we all have our knitting fails, and it's gonna happen. So just embrace it. And number 7, the last thing that I have learned in my first year of knitting is how much work and designer. Oh my gosh. I thought that I was going to learn how to knit, and I was going to start making my own patterns, and I was going to list them and live in passive income wonderland. via knitting patterns. Yes, I know. You can slap me through the screen. It's okay. I had no idea how much work goes into making a knitting pattern, and God bless you if you do it. You are a true hero, because I absolutely will never have the patience to do that. I think it is awesome, which is why I have zero problem paying for knitting patterns. I don't care if they're $12. I just don't. Like, you deserve to be paid for the insane amount of testing, writing, designing. I mean, I watch so many videos of people that are pattern writers and designers talk about, you know, all the steps that goes into writing a pattern, and absolutely not. I will happily test knit, but I would never want to go through all that to then put it up and hope that people buy it and hope that it takes off. So I have so much respect for people who design patterns. I love you. I will always buy your patterns. I would much rather spend $12 to have a really nice, well-written pattern than try to do it myself. So that is the other, and I think the last main point of things that I learned in my first year of knitting. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that I can think of? Don't think so. If you actually made it to the end of this podcast, also God bless you, because this is the very first podcast that I've ever done, and I know that it is all over the place, but I'm just kind of here to be real. I'm not here to be perfect, so just like those socks over there. Oh, so thank you so much if you made it to this point. Thank you so much for watching. What are the things that you learned within your first year, or maybe even first couple years? Or shoot, if you've been knitting for an extended amount of time, what are you still learning? Tell us what all you've learned in your knitting experience. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.